Hello, everyone. This is part 2 of session 16 of Pre-Socratics to Augustine, also called History of Philosophy 1. We now turn to Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, and today's recording is going to be devoted simply to the first sentence of the Nicomachean Ethics. And in order to figure out what it says, we will read a little more of Book 1, and I want to invite you to read more of Book 1. But primarily, we want to focus on the first sentence. The Nicomachean Ethics has been incredibly influential in ethics throughout medieval times, and again, people have rediscovered it and made it fruitful for their own studies in ethics and for their own theorizing in ethics. However, the first sentence could be a fallacy, or at least some scholars think that it is a fallacy. And you might think that would be really disappointing if one of the most influential, most important works in ethics in the Western tradition started with a fallacy. So that's going to be our question. We will study the sentence and look at it closely. And your assignment for today is going to be to come up with a view on whether you think the first sentence is a fallacy. And if not, why not? So here's the first sentence. Aristotle writes that every expertise translates techne, which can also be translated as craft, skill, profession, or art. Every expertise, every inquiry, every action, and every decision. And that is another term where the translation is a little tricky. The Greek is prohairesis, and it could also be translated as endeavor or undertaking. So, starting again, every expertise, every inquiry, every action, and every decision seems to aim at some good. And hence it is rightly said that all things aim at the good. Why would that be a fallacy? Or why could it seem to someone that it is a fallacy? You might argue the only thing that follows from, all these things aiming at some good is that they aim at some good, not that they aim at the good. And what is the good anyway? So you might think Aristotle simply is not entitled to say that it follows from all of these things, actions, decisions, inquiries, and technical kinds of practices aiming at some good, that hence everything aims at the good. All he can say is that all these things aim at some good, but then he's not really saying anything. So if you want to resist the idea that Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics starts with a fallacy, the first thing you need to do is ask yourself, well, what is the good? And that does become clear quite quickly as you read on, where Aristotle identifies Eudaimonia, that is a famous Greek term, often translated as happiness or a well-lived human life, a flourishing human life, a human life that goes well. Eudaimonia is the good. And other expressions for the good are final good, the final good, and ultimate good. So eudaimonia, happiness, is the good, the final good, the ultimate good. Hence, what the first sentence really says is every expertise, every inquiry, every action, every decision seems to aim at some good. And hence it is correctly said that they all aim at eudaimonia, happiness. Now, we made a little bit of progress because now at least we have an idea what the good is, but we still don't know why that is supposed to follow. Why would it follow from the fact that all these activities aim at some good, that hence everything aims at happiness? This is, in some sense, the most fundamental question of Aristotle's theory of motivation and theory of action. It's a really rich and complex question. The fundamental thought is that when you do something, anything at all, you engage in a job, you engage in inquiry, you perform some action, you make a decision for, some project of yours, that ultimately what motivates you is not just the immediate end of the action, is not just say that you walk up the stairs to fetch your book, but ultimately you do that because you aim at a well-going life, at happiness, at eudaimonia. And that is, in a sense, one of the demonstranda of the ethics as a whole, of Aristotle's ethics as a whole, that human action, even if it is really small-scale action, like walking up the stairs to fetch a book, ultimately aims at having one's life go well, ultimately aims at eudaimonia. So your homework assignment for today is to, either you're going to say the first sentence is a fallacy, but if you're not going to say that, then it is going to be your job to explain how a small-scale action, such as walking up the stairs to fetch a book, relates to eudaimonia, such that the first sentence of the Nicomachean ethics is not a fallacy.